Hello and welcome to Murder Dictionary Podcast. My name is Brianna and with me is Courtney.
Hello.
So before we get into our story tonight, we just want to remind you that there's a few things that you can find in our description and show notes. You can always find links to our social media if you want to follow us. You can find links to our Patreon.
And now, a thought from Geico Motorcycle.
It took 15 minutes to take a spirit animal quiz online.
Please be the cheetah. Please be the cheetah.
And learn your animal isn't the cheetah, but the far less appealing blobfish.
Oh, come on.
To add insult to injury, you could have used those 15 blobfish minutes to switch your motorcycle insurance to Geico.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on motorcycle insurance.
And our Threadless if you want some merch and bonus episodes. And you can find links to resources that we use for research. So if you want to do more reading and looking into the case, you can look that up in our show notes. And I think I'm just going to keep it real brief and get into the story. Yeah?
Yeah.
Fuck it.
Fuck it. I don't think, I'm like, what else is there to cover?
It's December/January. We're both fighting sickness
Been
constantly
sick
for the past weeks and months. And so, Courtney has been literally huffing eucalyptus for the past 30 minutes.
Bath and Body Works, feel free to send us a coupon code because you just take a couple hits off the stress relief eucalyptus spearmint soothing body scrub and you'll be ready to record in no time.
That's a ringing endorsement right there.
Yeah.
So we're just going to jump into the story because we're super sicky, huffing, and all sorts of shit. So
I'm fine with this.
We're on a new letter. We're on to D, and we're going to be doing Dirty Cops.
This is a fun one. I've had a lot of, ooh, that'll be exciting.
And I want to explore a few different kinds of stories. So tonight we're doing some old timey stuff. Next week we're doing a bit of a local love triangle kind of thing. And so we're going to look at it from different angles.
Tonight there's going to be some bowling hats.
Definitely.
That
major
era.
Bowlers.
That era.
Yeah. I love the old timey stories.
Some handlebar mustaches with the bowling hat.
Very interesting facial
high
hair.
High collars.
Basically, they just look like hipsters nowadays.
Yeah.
Yeah. This could take place in Austin,
What's the word?
2018.
When it's it's old, but it's new. And it's gilded with...
Annoying?
No. Steampunk!
When it's old, but it's new.
Steampunk.
Yes.
It's old, but it's new. You know that one. That one.
Yeah. But I like these. Just the historical kind of, I don't know.
I love
old-timey
history.
cases.
I just like learning about things from the past.
Yeah. So this one's going to be pretty rad. And it's going to be more like the typical what you think of when you think of Dirty Cop.
Definitely.
Yeah. So we're talking tonight about Charles Becker, who was born to a German-American family on July 26th, 1870. And he came from a small suburb of Sullivan County in New York, which when I think of old-timey, for some reason, I think of New York every time.
Always East Coast.
Brick buildings, smoke in the air.
Gangs of New York.
Exactly.
That scene.
So he grew up to be a really tall, strong dude with a noticeably broad, strong shoulders.
He'd be played by Christoph Waltz in the movie version, correct?
Yes.
It Gangs of New York, Christoph Waltz is walking around in a bowling hat.
Yes.
That's Charles Becker.
Completely. But with just big, strong man kind of build.
Yeah, he's broad, strong, is regularly said.
Yeah. Eventually, he got tired of country living and he moved to the big city in 1888.
It's amazing how times change. People are just, I want to get off the grid.
Right.
I want to move to Colorado or Utah. Now,
not these days.
No, now,
the only way to make it was to go to the big city, it seemed like.
The country mouse and the city mouse.
Mm-hmm. His first job in the big city was as a bartender in a German beer hall that was just off the Bowery. But what happened was, whenever there was trouble in the bar, he was the person that jumped in, and it earned him this reputation of being a skilled fighter. So he was promoted to be a bouncer because that was his skill set.
Yeah, you do what you know.
Through his job at the bar, Charles met a man named Big Tim Sullivan, who was a state senator. He was also regarded as basically the king of the Tenderloin.
Great name.
There's a lot of names in here. I'm just going to be honest from off the bat. I cut out some of these names because they were very clearly racist.
Yeah.
But Big Tim Sullivan I left in because that was fine.
Okay.
Yeah. But there was some of them where I was just like, yeah, I'm just going to use
Sure.
this person's government name. Just if you read into this story and you see some shit I didn't include, I'm just not going to say those things. FYI. So Tim Sullivan was a corrupt politician who oversaw basically all the bribery and payoffs from the old world to the police and politicians. I totally fucked it up and it was supposed to say the underworld. I think when I'm typing too fast, it just autocorrects. I've noticed that a lot.
I thought it was I wasn't sure. I was like,
No.
older world, maybe she just means like the old country.
Nope, I
Okay.
meant the underworld.
That makes more sense.
Tim really liked Charles and he arranged for him to be hired onto the police department. And I think back in these days, it seemed like all you had to kind of do was be that kind of brute. Like if you're a good fighter, you should be a cop,
Definitely.
right? That's old-timey cops. So that's the skill set that he got promoted with. And that's what Tim saw in him. And he was like, you'd be perfect on NYPD. Fellow officers said that Charles was noticeably more intelligent than the other officers working in the NYPD at this time. Many of his colleagues liked to hang out at bars after work, but Charles basically went straight home to be with his wife, Helen Lynch.
Not something we see in a lot of these dirty cop stories, by the way.
Right.
Is him rushing home to his wife.
Usually there's kind of this home life that feeds into the underworld life, you know?
Yeah,
You're avoiding your house, you're staying away from your wife, or you're a single dude
Yes.
and you're just out running in the streets and you end up being a dirty cop.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit different that he ended up being really, by all accounts, like a good husband, you know? So she was a special needs educator, and it's noted that sometimes he even helped her grade papers and homework whenever she got kind of behind schedule.
It's kind of precious.
Isn't it cute?
Yes. I thought that was adorable.
Spoiler alert, it doesn't end up being very adorable
no,
at the
it's
end.
not the cutest.
So at first, Charles mostly just kept his head down. He did his job, but it really wasn't long before he became a corrupt cop, like many of his colleagues at the time. Historically, this was kind of a period where most of the cops were dirty, from what I understand. So he kind of tried to do well and keep it straight, and then eventually just went down the wrong path like everybody else.
Well, he was placed in his job because this guy saw something in him. He could be molded and he would do what he wanted him to do. So he placed him there in his own agenda. And this guy's just like, alrighty, here I go, doing this. I'm a cop now.
Yeah.
Is what it seems like to me.
So basically, he's a bouncer with a badge.
Yeah.
You know?
His future is not like his creation.
Yeah.
He's like a ploy, like a pawn.
Mm-hmm. So, of course, once he went kind of dirty, Charles was accused of brutality and false arrest several times early on in his career. By 1896, Charles accidentally shot and killed an innocent bystander while he was in pursuit of a burglar. Now, to make it worse, instead of just copping to the mistake and admitting his wrongs, he attempted to cover up his error by claiming that the victim was a known burglar, which by all accounts, everybody knew wasn't true. The truth was, of course, eventually revealed, and he was suspended for 30 days.
For 30 days.
Which seems just atrocious to me. 30 days, someone was killed, you know?
Yeah.
That seems just so minor. I mean, I know that you're in the line of duty or whatever, but that's kind of bullshit. You still killed someone.
It was a different time.
Okay.
We didn't have to like pretend to feel bad about anything.
I guess.
Police brutality. It was like, no, I fucked him up. Here's 30 days. You're good. We understand.
Man, this is
Right?
It's just nuts. But
Yeah.
that's why, like, you know, things have progressed in a certain way where nobody trusts cops at this point.
No.
Because it's like, well, we're not too far off from that, you know?
Yeah.
There's still people doing the same thing, not getting held accountable. So there you go. Charles gained the biggest notoriety in the fall of 1896 when he arrested a sex worker on Broadway named Ruby Young. and she was using the alias Dora Clark at the time. When she was arrested, Ruby was hanging out with 2 chorus girls and the writer, Stephen Crane. The arrest was highly publicized because Stephen Crane was already famous for writing The Red Badge of Courage.
Remember that book from
Yes.
school?
Oh, definitely.
See, I don't because I never read it. But then I remember writing a report and like doing that whole thing, but I couldn't tell you shit. I remember like Civil War and guilt. I don't remember.
Dude, I remember that we had to read it. I don't even remember if I read it or if I just made something up.
I remember almost everything I've ever like read in school, that kind of thing.
Really?
This one's just kind of like a blank for me.
Huh.
It's kind of funny.
No, I don't remember most things that happened in school.
I am still just destroyed. You could ask my best friend since we were 3 years old. She's the same. We sobbed our eyes out in Where the Red Fern Grows.
Oh.
I remember learning, what does entrails mean specifically from that book? That's where I learned what that meant. Dog's entrails, then he tried to put them back in.
Oh, God.
Little boy. It's horrible. I remember reading this in 2nd grade.
I don't remember any of this at all.
Horrible. So sad.
The day after the arrest, the author, Stephen Crane, went to court and defended Ruby Young by saying that she wasn't actually working at the time of her arrest. She was just socializing. So there was really no cause to arrest her for any sort of prostitution charge or anything like that. He insisted there were no grounds to arrest her since she was really just socializing, not engaging in the act of prostitution, nothing like that. Of course, this sent the media into a frenzy. So New York City Police Commissioner Theodore Roosevelt came to Charles Becker's defense and said Stephen Crane was despicable for defending a sex worker.
Despicable.
Yes, it's a different time.
Isn't
But
it?
really, it's not progressed that far.
No, but great word.
Yes.
And this is Teddy Roosevelt.
Yep. Good old Teddy.
I was not surprised that he was formerly an NYPD cop, but I don't feel like I ever knew that.
Yeah, I know. I'm just bad with history.
Side note, Stephen Crane flees the scene, goes down south, goes to Cuba with some other chick whose name was Cora.
Really?
I'm not even playing right now. Yeah, they go to Cuba, and she becomes like the first woman on the scene reporter because they go to Cuba and they do all this like reporter, like how we would have, Anderson Cooper in the field now. This is Cora and Stephen Crane on the front line or whatever the fuck's going on right then.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and I kept reading it thinking she went from being a possible defendant to being this, first lady, and then I was like, oh wait, it's a different aura name.
Yeah.
What are the odds of that? Side note.
So after that scandal blew over, a couple years passed, and in 1898, Charles jumped into the Hudson River to rescue a drowning man, and the newspapers declared him a hero for saving the man's life. So first he's got this scandal, then he's got this sort of hero moment, which I think was just this desperate attempt to kind of have a PR stunt. You know what I mean? Like he wants to save his name and his image.
Yeah.
Because all that people know about him is he's the guy that shot an innocent person and then brought someone in on prostitution charges that wasn't in the act at the same time,
That's true.
That's what I think. So when he did this, Charles was thanked and congratulated for over a week in all sorts of papers and stuff until the man came forward and said that Charles had actually offered him $15 to jump in the river so he could play the hero.
I didn't want to agree with you because I'm like, spoiler alert. Yeah, he fucking needed attention. And hey, look, I'm a good guy. Hey, I'm going to give you $15 for you to jump in here. Okay, sorry, but if a police officer sees anybody in a lake and they jump in to save them, like, yeah, you did that. That's what you kind of are supposed to do as a human. But then, like, secondary, you're a cop.
Well, at a time when all the cops are corrupt, it does stand
out.
out.
Point.
It does
Yes.
kind of like, oh, this cop did a good thing.
This is true.
Now
I wonder also, I don't know a ton about if people at that time were really like, hey, everyone's corrupt around us. Like, do they know the actual
It seems
depth
like it.
of it? And it does seem like it.
From the articles that I was reading, it seemed like it was pretty well known that the cops were corrupt.
So that
and
probably is part of why it was such a big deal that he saved a drowning man.
I feel like there was this quote that I was coming across, like, you know, the cops were the biggest gang in New York or something to that effect.
You're right. I did read that
And this
too.
was that time period where it was just particularly bad.
Gangs of New York.
Yes.
What are we doing? What are we doing here? Yeah, we already know the answer. It's always in a movie or a TV show.
But when I first read that he saved someone's life,
I was
you know,
hyped.
I was, and I also felt like, okay, maybe he saw this happening and he was like, this is my opportunity, you know? But then you come to find out that he paid the person. But even if he hadn't paid the person, I think at the time he was probably desperately searching for ways to redeem himself, you know?
Well, if it wasn't going to come to him, he was going to create it, obviously.
Exactly.
It was taking too long.
He had to
Speed this up.
orchestrate something.
Got to speed this up.
No patience.
People need to love me.
So after this scandal blew over, it was, you know, he was kind of a marked man. Everybody knew that he had some sort of fucked up past. So he was transferred to the 16th precinct in the Tenderloin, which was the most corrupt district at the time.
And you cannot forget that wonderful person with Big Tim Sullivan was the king of the Tenderloin.
Yes.
So we're back to the Tenderloin.
Yeah. And this is probably where, you know, this is where he came from when he first arrived in New York. It was probably a comfortable transition for him.
Very.
But made it really easy for him to just slip into dirty cop mode.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Is that on your phone? Is that like a mode you can go into? Dirty cop mode?
I just toggle it on.
Dun-dun.
Dirty cop mode on.
Love it.
So after all these scandals, good, bad, or indifferent, Charles had a bit of notoriety and acknowledgement, which he used in 1902 to advocate for the NYPD to adopt the 3-platoon system, which basically shortened the long hours that officers were working per shift. And I don't know the specifics, but I mean, I know cops normally do like 12-hour shifts or something like that. So maybe it was just to shorten it to a regular 8-hour workday. But he was at the forefront of trying to get these changes done. In 1906, Charles was assigned to a special unit tasked with investigating the alleged corruption of police inspector Max Schmidberger. Max had been hated within the NYPD because of his testimony in an 1894 investigation of police corruption in New York. It just seems like it's a back and forth, like a ping pong of corruption, where people are like, I'm not corrupt, you're corrupt. Look at what you did.
They're just like throwing the attention off themselves onto someone else all the time. It's just project here, project there. No one really gets fired. They just kind of go underground for a little while. And then, you know, suddenly he saves a drowning man.
Right.
And everything's cool.
It's all misdirection.
And then they have a toy drive at Christmas and everyone forgets.
I mean, really, I think that it's all like, these are all attempts to throw people off and be like, we're not really corrupt.
Misdirection.
Look at all these toys we got. Look at how I saved that drowning man. Look at how I charged someone else with corruption.
Yep.
So clearly it's just internally within the NYPD. They're just ping-ponging back and forth.
I agree.
The investigation from Charles' unit led to a trial, and the police commissioner appointed Charles as a head of one of New York's 3 anti-vice squads. Clearly the wrong person, because he's heavily involved in all things underworld.
Completely wrong person.
In all reality, the anti-vice squads were pretty much a joke. And Charles would be the leader of an already crooked squad since the NYPD was extremely corrupt at the time. So nothing really happened in New York without the right payoff around this era, whether it be everything from building permits and gambling houses, prostitution, anything else like that. It was just another business expense for most people in the underworld. So anyone that was a pimp or a casino owner had to seek protection by paying off police officers. I mean, we've seen this in movies time and time again, but it's historically accurate. This is the time period that we're talking about.
Movies actually get it pretty right. on this one.
Yeah.
And at first I'm sure it was, oh, that's so over the top. But it's like, no, some of this is like just totally based in fact.
It's spot on.
And it's really crazy to think that. But
It's
a
true.
different time is what we'll always just say about things like that. It was a different time.
Definitely. And while we know all this police corruption was going on, a lot of what like the movies don't depict very clearly is that the police openly colluded with politicians in City Hall.
Yes.
And they were the ones to make the call to leave people alone if they paid, and then raid the businesses that refused to pay. So the police fed into the politicians, and then they provided safety for business owners. Charles was no exception, and he was fully entrenched in the NYPD corruption by this point. In January 1907, Charles became the bagman for the 16th Precinct captain.
Brianna, what's a bagman?
This fool was collecting all the money. He was
All
the
the
Scrooge
money.
McDuck of the 16th Precinct.
He swam in his money.
Yes.
God, that was a great cartoon. DuckTales too.
Oh, yeah.
Like the old one, not the new one. But
Of course.
the bagman, and he made
10%. Yeah, his cut was 10% for collecting all the money. So anything that came through the 16th Precinct, he was getting 10%. So in the first year, he made $8,000, which today would be $21K.
I'd say it's worth it.
On top of his police salary,
You're already there. You're already a cop. You're already making your salary. I mean,
you're going to be working no matter what.
the fuck?
It's
yeah.
a $21K bonus.
I'm totally understanding. And I'm just thinking about him too. Like, he hasn't done anything yet that would put him into prison, not for more than a couple of years. If he did get caught, he'd talk his way out of it. He's got politicians on the side. Totally worth it.
And I think there was nothing to tell him like, oh, this is wrong. This is the system that he came into. He's not really, let's say, hurting anyone coming into that system. It's not a system of his design. He's just the collection person. And before him, it was someone else. And after him, it'll be someone different.
Yeah.
So even if he refused the job, someone else would do it.
Totally.
I think that's what gets people to like go do these things, because they're like, well, it's going to happen whether I collect the 21K or not.
No risk, no reward.
Right?
Yep.
Fortune favors the bold is what I hear.
Oh, that's a good one. I like that.
So in 1910, Charles was promoted to commander of an anti-gang squad.
Ha! What a joke.
Yeah. Instead of fighting gangs, Charles used this squad to shake down casino owners. That was his main goal.
Genius.
So those who didn't pay were tormented, assaulted, raided constantly, and ultimately they ended up paying or losing their business. That was it. There was no way to really fight the cops that were trying to do these collections, because you
They're
would
the
lose your
police.
license, you would get raided. Like, there was no way to
Yeah.
stay in business.
What are you going to do?
Soon the operation became too big for Charles to handle alone, so he hired known gangster and murderer Big Jack Zelig to get his guys to help.
We'll just get Jack's guys. Who's Jack? Big Jack.
Big Jack.
Oh, Big Jack's guys. Okay.
I like how everything is big, because no other nickname could I include, because they're all
So true.
racist.
Yeah.
I'm just like, I hate to bring it up again, but everything is big, little, or racist.
Yeah,
It's
a fact.
Anyway, so side note, one of Big Jack's crew was Harry Horowitz, who had a reputation for subduing rebellious victims by putting them in his lap and breaking their backs.
What does that mean?
I know it has
What does
nothing to
that
do with
look
Charles,
like?
but I was just sitting there trying to picture, like, how is this even physically possible?
Right.
Also, how not only just the injury itself, but I feel like this move is very condescending is not the right word, but belittling, like just trying to like make them small. Like, I'm going to put you in my lap and break your back,
I mean, I feel like he just sits down, pulls him down like Santa kind of on their lap, and then he just bends forward real hard and fast. That's all I can think of.
It's so crazy to me.
Or he slams. That's going to hurt his dick. He's going to he slams him down real hard. But no, like, that's not it. I mean,
Something. I don't know, but it just seemed, I pictured more of a like putting someone over your knee, like a knee spanking kind of thing.
Oh, I like this.
But I don't know if that's just me. I was like, how does this even happen? Like he just like twists them a certain way. But that is the craziest shit to me. I know it doesn't have anything to do with Charles, but like these were the type of crew that were going to collect on behalf of Charles. Just crazy, backbreaking
and
Santa
his nickname
Clauses.
has nothing to do with the fact that he kills people with his lap.
Well, again, I didn't include his nickname.
Maybe it does.
No, like I wish that it would have had something to do with his backbreaking, but of course it was a Jewish reference.
Oh,
of course.
No.
Yes. Well, all of them were like that. Anyone that was Italian had like a terrible.
Okay. Got
yeah.
it. I thought it was like derogatory. No, this is what you are.
Yeah. It's,
Like which Harry? Oh, that Harry. Oh, okay. Big Jack.
but it kind of, I don't know. Whatever.
We're never.
That's a discussion for a whole nother
we'll
day.
Never get it.
I just can't even wrap my head around that kind of thought process.
It was a different time.
Thank you for reminding me. I forgot that it was a different time.
That's where we are.
Let me toggle to the different time mode.
Yeah.
There we go.
That
It's a different time. So in the summer of 1912, Charles attempted to collect from a brand new casino called Hesper Club on its opening night. The owner, named Herman Beansy Rosenthal, informed Charles that this was basically Senator Big Tim Sullivan's territory, and he had no right to collect from him. He would never be giving money to Charles because it was Big Tim's territory. Of course, Charles was livid, but he figured it really wasn't worth the trouble, so he let it go. But later on, when Big Tim Sullivan got very sick and wasn't able to work any longer, Charles returned to start collecting from Herman Rosenthal. So Charles decided he would get one of his men, known as Bald Jack Rose, to stay at the club and skim 20% off the casino's take by any means necessary. At first, I thought that he basically had someone hired there, but the more I was reading into it, he just had someone basically sit at the bar. End of every night, he came in, gave me 20%.
That is insane.
So Charles thought Herman would just be compliant and realize he was no match for Charles and his men, the same way that every other casino owner eventually fell in line. Instead, Herman went to City Hall and he began complaining to whoever would listen about the dirty cop that was trying to extort him. While Herman was complaining about the extortion, Charles was getting pressure from the police commissioner to deal with the Hesper issue. So again, everyone in the police force, everyone at City Hall is like, collect this money. But they can't appear to be going along with the police extorting these businesses.
It's an interesting place to be.
Yes. So when a business owner comes in and they're like, hey, there's this dirty cop, the government has to like pretend at least to take it seriously.
Pretend, sure.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
How do you fake that? Oh, we care. Oh, okay. We'll send out our brightest and bluest.
Right.
To help you.
It's a very
but
weird.
They're the bad guys.
Yeah. Intricate balance where they're just kind of trying to pretend that they're
and
taking
so much
care
of
of
it's
it.
just like financial crimes, really.
Yeah.
It's all just money. It's all related to money. Like, sure, they kill people here and there on the side, but it's all related to, I know, it's all back to, it goes back to the money at this casino, the money,
Right.
the money, moving the money around. It's
yeah, I mean, there was a
pretty
lot of
insane
casualties. There was a lot of
Sure, but
people
that's
getting beat up.
byproduct of the extortion, byproduct of the financial shit on this. Like, it's all about the money.
Yeah.
It's really weird.
It usually
really
is.
crazy.
So finally, Charles decided to raid the Hesper Club and shut it down. He also stationed uniformed cops inside the club to make sure that it stayed closed. So it was able to basically, from what I understand, operate as a bar, but none of the gambling could take place. And although, when this happened to other casinos, they would just come back and check, let's say once a week or something. But instead, Charles was so hung up on the Hesper Club that he had cops there 24/7. Herman was outraged by this, so he ramped up his efforts to get local politicians to intervene.
Good for Herman.
I mean, he wasn't going to take it. He's like, this is my business.
Yeah.
I work hard. We have a ton of casinos around. You can't just hold me accountable, you know?
And as far as he can tell, it's like just this one cop, like this one dick, just won't
Right.
let things go.
So he figures if he just gets that one cop in line, then his business is safe, you know? So District Attorney Charles Whitman was the perfect person to help Herman take on Charles. This particular DA had political aspirations, and he thought that taking down a crooked cop like Charles Becker could further his own career.
I'm sure he was right in his head.
Of course. So they began planning their takedown of Charles Becker in early July of 1912. And D.A. Whitman said that he planned to convene a grand jury. So things were really moving forward and coming to a head.
People are listening now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is Charles Becker is in danger. Like, he probably would be going to jail, you know.
And Charles is an enterprise now. Like, he's a business. He's got people under him.
He's probably Big Charles.
Big Charles. He
At this
probably
point.
is Big Charles. Which Charles? Oh, Big Charles.
Right.
Okay, gotcha. Bald Jack? No, Big Jack. Okay, just checking.
So word quickly spread through the criminal underworld that Herman was coming after Charles with the help of the DA. And many fellow criminals were really upset with him because here's this casino owner turning on the underworld.
How dare he want what's his?
Really?
I mean, shit. Who does that? We're just the police trying to steal your money, and you're going to have a problem with that.
But, I mean, fellow criminal, everybody was upset at this point because fellow criminals are like, you're bringing heat on us.
This is true.
Because now the cops and politicians are going to be looking at our businesses more so. Instead of just being able to pay them off and have them go away, now there's going to be some accountability if this goes forward. And
Not
then
good.
The police are like, hey, you're upsetting this delicate balance that we had, you know? So with Herman coming after Charles, it threatened to upset this, you know, underworld ecosystem that kept criminals, cops, and politicians all happy.
It's like, could be narrated by Richard Attenborough. The delicate underworld of the ecosystem. Is it Richard or David? Because I always confuse the two. One is the host, and one is the old man from Jurassic Park.
You know, I don't know. We're learning more and more this episode that I just
So much.
don't remember anything.
Okay, good. Okay, cool. I'm just going to take another hit off the eucalyptus.
I need to do like my brain Kegels or something.
We need more vitamin B12.
That's it. So on the evening of July 15th, 1912, Herman went to a local hangout for fellow gamblers called Cafe Metropole.
What is he doing going anywhere right now? Like, I mean, really, come on.
I know.
You're a target.
Like always, I don't want to victim blame because he should.
Oh, yeah,
you know,
I'm sorry. That's what I'm doing right now.
But at the same time,
what the fuck are you doing?
This is really, in any sort of gangster movie, this is a time to lay low.
Yeah.
You know? I think this is Herman basically being like, I'm not going to be afraid.
Yeah.
You know, because if he does cower, then the opposite thing happens where people don't take him seriously.
Yeah.
And then, you know, then that threatens his business as well.
Yep.
So he was just like, I'm going to go about things like any other day. Normally I would go to this cafe, hang out with these other gamblers and whatever. That's what I'm going to do. But of course, this was not any other day. And as he walked into the room, it completely went silent. And it was clear that people were very angry with him about going to the DA. So Herman just kind of kept his head down. He went all the way to the back and he sat there alone. And nobody came to talk to him for hours. Normally, this is a social hangout. So it was a little bit odd that nobody was talking to Herman. It was notably different than any other day. Just before 2 a.m., the waiter approached him and told Herman that there were men outside that wanted to speak to him. When he went outside, he saw several men waiting for him on the street. Suddenly, 4 shots rang out and Herman collapsed. One of the men walked over, aimed the gun, and fired one final shot into his head at point-blank range. The murderers fled the scene while cops rushed in, followed by curious locals, then reporters, then photographers. And again, this is one of those old-timey cases where news is spreading by word of mouth. So you've got, reporters taking pictures on the scene, like within minutes.
Newsies kids with newspapers.
Exactly.
Extra, extra.
Yeah, it was just kind of floating through the streets that this had just happened. And people immediately suspected Charles Becker. So much so that a reporter at the crime scene called Charles just minutes after the murder.
Yeah, there was no secrecy here.
Yeah, everybody knew, Herman and Charles are fighting. That's it. There's this beef. If one of them comes up missing, you know who did it. The reporter unintentionally ended up confirming Charles' alibi that he was at home and in bed at the time of the murder. I don't know if the reporter expected that he would pick up the phone or...
Oh, I'm sure he didn't.
Right?
Yeah, no,
I'm sure that was a shock.
Because he's the one that killed him. Like, you know what I mean? He's he's probably not there.
You know what? I'm thinking that he probably thought that he would get a hold of Charles' wife.
That's what I'm in my head.
And get a quote.
Oh, yeah, he's a reporter.
And he's just like, what?
Yeah.
My husband?
Exactly.
What's going on? Like, he probably wanted something like that. He didn't expect that he was going to be like, oh, shit.
No.
You're home. You didn't do this. He thought he was going to be like Johnny on the spot, getting all the inside info from the wife.
Probably.
Yeah. So detectives looked into the license plate number of the getaway car and traced it back to Bald Jack Rose, who you may remember as Charles' collection man, who was the one taking the skim off of the Hesper Club.
Who you may remember from previous episodes. Like these names of these people, and they're just
How could you forget is what I should say.
So funny.
Eyewitnesses also pointed out William Shapiro, Bridgely Weber, and Harry Vallone as being outside the Metropole minutes before the shooting. These were all people associated with Charles Becker.
Charles' gang.
D.A. Whitman offered Bald Jack Rose and the three accomplices immunity in exchange for information.
He had to because they'd kill him. All these guys would just be dead next.
Right. The crew, of course, implicated some of Charles Becker's other associates, including Louis Rosenberg, Frank Serofici, Jacob Seidenschmer, and Harry Horowitz, the backbreaker from earlier.
Oh, yeah, Harry.
Through further interrogation, which implicated Charles Becker as the mastermind behind Herman's murder, the grand jury was able to indict him.
So he's the Charles Manson of this group.
Yes.
Those are all his little ladies.
I mean, truly.
Yeah.
That's the way that this big, huge case shook down. He was kind of the boogeyman. He was the scary person in the underworld. He didn't do anything himself,
so how do you get him? It's very early Bugliosi. They're laying the groundwork.
Yeah, it's really just, I don't know. Again, the reporter did not intend to...
No,
to
crack
get
the
him
case
at
wide
home,
open, practically.
But because they knew he was already home, now they've got to flip all these people. And people, I mean, they didn't care. They flipped on him right away, especially when they knew that they were protecting themselves.
Yeah.
On July 29th, 1912, Charles Becker was approached at the precinct's closing hour by special detectives from the DA's office, and he was placed under arrest for Herman's murder. By the time that he was taken into custody, it's estimated that Charles had earned over $100K from his extortion of casinos and brothels. And today, that would be $258,000 on top of his policeman's salary that he was earning.
I don't think it's worth it. If I was able to just do some time and like whatever, be cool, run shit in there, and then come out, maybe it'd be worth it.
I don't know. To me, it seems like a small amount of money. He probably thought that it wasn't a lot to do and it was going to happen anyway. Like I said earlier, like who cares if it's him as the bagman or somebody else?
Yeah, I guess.
The $258K better be in his pocket. That's probably the way he thought of it. But I'll just be honest, I'm fucking lazy. Like, I don't want to do this extra shit and possibly be in danger, have to beat people up, get beat up. Like, it's not worth it to me. I don't want to, you know? But then again, this is the reason I would never become a cop, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I would never be in this situation in the first place.
Don't you want the excitement in your life?
That's true. I want to be an action movie star. I'm going to be the next Vin Diesel.
It's kind of like the same thing we, read and study and see in bikers. It's like to be part of a brotherhood, to have like this group of dudes and, just stomp people out and just like, yeah, look what I did. Yeah, motherfucker, don't tell anyone. And like, okay, I won't until I need immunity for when you kill someone. Like, that's always how these end.
I think that honestly, that's exactly why people became cops at this time. I can't speak to anybody today.
I like this.
But, I think that instead of joining a criminal gang or whatever, they honestly probably had more of a chance
Legion or something, right?
Yeah, they just could be more lucrative. Like, it was probably more money coming in if you were a cop and you didn't have to worry about charges being brought against you. Whereas if you opened a casino, you could get raided, lose your business, you could go to jail, all these things. But if you're a cop, you have free reign to do whatever you want. But it's still exciting. You're still in an action movie, but you're not going to go to jail.
That's exactly what I think of. That's what I mean. Like, you're still in an action movie.
Yeah.
And
it's the same thing, like you said, with bikers. It's the same sort of draw. It's the same person. It's the guy that's the bouncer at the German beer hall.
Yep. Look at that.
I mean, I think that that's really the motivating factor behind it for Charles and so many others, I think that most of the cops at this point were not being caught for doing these sort of things. So this was really the worst case scenario.
That is exactly what I picked up as well.
Right?
Yes. This is definitely one that we have to make an example, kind of, I think, in a way, because there's been inklings. People are talking just like, hey, the cops are dirty, right? Yeah, I know the cops are dirty. Okay, cool. Just checking. People know this.
It's just a known, accepted fact.
Totally
so
known.
Most people think they're going to get this 258K and walk away scot-free. But for Charles, that didn't happen.
Christoph Waltz in this movie, at this point,
he gets held accountable.
Yeah, he's going to get held accountable.
And made an example of on top of that.
That's right.
Yeah. So, of course, this case was huge. The trial started. It was so high profile, cover of every newspaper, and they were going to, like we said, make an example of him. So it was fast-tracked and went to trial within a couple months of Charles Becker's arrest, which we know how slow the legal system works. Most other cases are waiting, a year, couple years sometimes. They just send him to trial right away. You would think that they could keep him in jail for a long time, build a better case, whatever it was, but they wanted to send him to trial right away.
I also think that there's a side of this where the cops are just like, get this done.
Yeah,
we need this gone. Like, we know that you're going to make an example out of this. We get it. He's a fucked up guy. He's extorting people. There's a lot more going on. We know. Make this happen quickly, please. And they're probably like, all right, well, if you're going to give him to us, sure.
And on top of that, of course, I'm forgetting that there was this DA that wanted to use this for his political career.
That too.
So I think that was probably a huge motivating factor because they were like, hey, I could be elected to office the sooner I get this done.
I would be very curious to know about when his campaign or his political life started.
Yes.
Like what year that was after this.
Yeah.
Find that out.
So the trial started and Bald Jack Rose
Good old Bald Jack's making another appearance.
He testified that Charles told him, quote, Herman ought to be put off this earth. There's a fellow I would like to have croaked, have him murdered, cut his throat, dynamite him, or anything.
I can hear my grandmother saying this. There's a fellow I'd like to have croaked. Like, no shit. Just, I'm never going to forget that. Oh, my God.
Dynamite him.
Dynamite him or anything.
Yeah.
What a great phrase.
Old-timey.
Oh, he must have been pissed.
Yes.
With a billy club and shit. It's all I can see is like, it might be Scotland Yard, but like that bowling hat and the mustache. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm seeing it is? You know what it is? It's the picture of H.H. Holmes.
Yes.
The black and white. That is my picture, but it's Christoph Waltz.
Yes.
But that is my uniform that I'm seeing in my head, folks. That's what I'm looking at. It just clicked. That's who I'm seeing.
No, that makes perfect sense. Most people look like that.
That's what
in
they
this
look
story,
like.
really.
Cracking on people with clubs.
Jack also said that Charles reassured him that police and politicians would be happy that Herman was taken out. So really, Jack thought there was no risk here. Charles thought there was no risk here. And basically every politician and cop wanted this guy out of the way.
And Charles is a cop. And if a cop's telling you, like,
Who are you going to believe?
It's going to be fine.
Right. So according to the people that flipped on Charles, the hit was carried out for about $1,000, which today would be $26K.
It's an expensive hit.
Yes.
It's a lot of money.
Charles and his attorneys decided that he would not testify in his defense, but it's debatable whether his testimony would have really helped him or hurt him. He was such, a disliked figure at this point.
He would have hired people for $15 to be like, he saved me when I drowned in a river.
Right.
Asshole.
And anything that he would have said, people would have been like, can you believe that? Anything.
Side-eye.
Really. So Charles Becker was found guilty and he was sentenced to death, which is just so crazy to me.
Doesn't seem, I mean, this is a person we're making an example of.
Right.
Clearly.
And that's what the clear picture of what happened here is, that he was sentenced to be executed. It's very just like.
I agree completely. It just doesn't go in line with anything.
Yeah.
Because, okay. And it's funny because I always find myself going, okay, yeah, he killed someone. But with these old stories especially, they got to kill a few people to get death sentences. This guy killed one person in this extortion. It's always like these financial crimes. They're going to make an example out of him.
It was really highly unusual.
Really weird to get death for like all this,
for masterminding one murder that you weren't even at.
Yeah.
So, and again, I'm not defending it or saying that that's okay, but you can see that this didn't really line up with similar crimes at the time. There was, any other person that murdered one person was really not being executed, it seemed like. And especially someone that wasn't even at the scene, that it was basically a conspiracy to commit murder. That's crazy.
His past caught up with him. Like, he had enough people saying he did this shit. And there were enough, like, other cops and people that you would believe. I think that it's really just like his reputation and his past caught up with him. Yeah.
I mean, we were talking about this before. I think that because they couldn't hold him accountable for all these other things, the DA was like, well, I'm going to advance my political career by holding him accountable for the things that we really don't have evidence to punish him for. So we've got this one crime, but we know he did hundreds of other things. Well, then let's take it to the full extent that we can.
All you got to do is just make people think it's possible.
So, yeah, it's just a very severe sentence for what actually happened. But I mean, I can see why all these points added up to lead to this. It's not okay, but there's definitely reasons why that happened. A short while after his trial, his accomplices were also found guilty and sentenced to death.
Bad friends.
Well, here's the thing. They were promised immunity or a lighter sentence or whatever they were promised.
Yeah.
And everywhere that I read, they were made certain promises because they testified.
That's a bummer.
And they were still executed.
Oh, man. You rolled all over this guy and you're still going to die?
Right.
I can't even imagine. Oh.
I think that's just one of the craziest things is that so many people were executed.
Yeah.
Because, the whole list that I said, we're talking 6-7 people or something that agreed to testify. It's very, very just eye for an eye.
Crazy.
After the trials came to a close for everybody, D.A. Whitman was, of course, hailed as a hero for bringing down all this corruption. And eventually, he was elected governor of New York. The verdict was overturned on appeal on the grounds that the presiding judge, John Joffe, had been biased against the defendant. However, there was another trial, and he was found guilty in 1914.
Because he did it. Sorry, side note.
Charles Becker proclaimed his innocence through the entire process.
Of course he did.
At 5:30 a.m. on July 30th, 1915, Charles was led to the electric chair. His last words were, "Into thy hands, O Lord, I commend my spirit." Here's some details that I thought were a bit gnarly. They put him in the electric chair, They started the first shock, and it was clear that the voltage had been misjudged, and he was still alive after the first shock. So they gave him a second shock, but he survived the second blast of volts.
So then they just were like, you get to live, right? Right, Brianna? They were like, hey, listen.
They're like, well, you
fucked this up.
are a superhero, so at this point, you could just walk home, right?
Yeah, you can just walk home.
This is, I mean, so brutal and insane to me that this happened. So after the second one, men came in and they adjusted the straps because he had just been like shaking out of the straps pretty much. Crazy,
it's not
right?
Funny, but it's like
no, it's fucking devastating. This
problem.
Is completely
Someone
nuts.
help. Someone fix this.
I mean, this just speaks to how barbaric the execution is.
The electric chair is something else.
Oh my God! So they adjusted his straps, and the witnesses were still there, like looking on, watching this whole thing in horror. And some of them, they panicked and started like hyperventilating, and some of them even fainted watching this whole thing.
Yeah, I bet.
I would. I can't even imagine. So after this whole thing, they adjusted the straps and they increased it one more time. And the third shock actually killed him. That's the most fucked up execution story I've ever heard. I can't even wrap my head around
that
it.
way, because all I can think of is neighbor Art in The Burbs when he gets shocked and he's like touching his fillings and he's like, they're hot. That's all I can think of. But
it's just so
it's terrible, Bran. It's terrible. It's
I don't know.
It's awful.
The death penalty just shakes me to my core. And these sort of events is what kind of does that to me. Is just like, I can't believe that we're going to do this to human beings, you know? I don't know.
You know, it's interesting to me too that like they miscalculated the voltage or something like that, right? Because wouldn't it be like, let's say 100 will kill people. So you do 1,000.
I guess.
Every time, just to make sure.
But
you know what I mean?
Not to be weird, but like at what point, if you put it up to 1,000, do they just explode and their like watermelon head goes everywhere, or what's going on?
That is Pink Floyd The Wall, isn't it? Is that what you're seeing? Because that's what I'm saying.
I think so. But I don't know. I mean,
question.
You would think that it would be more easy to calculate. And part of me in my head is just like, well, maybe this could happen in a place where they barely execute people. We're talking about New York, a highly populated place with plenty of executions. You know what I mean? Like they have experience.
They should have this together by now.
This shouldn't happen to anyone that's experienced, you know?
Are you experienced?
You know what I mean?
Yes,
it's just like,
I know what you mean. I think the whole thing's insane. Of course, you fucking electrocute people enough to kill them the first time. I mean, this is 1 and 1 is 2 shit.
It's so crazy.
Maybe, I swear to God, this sounds fucking crazy what I'm about to say, but it might be something related to how much the cost of the fucking power at the time.
Oh, God.
I don't know. It could be that simple.
I think it probably is something like that.
Something like that.
That we're just not even thinking because we're not in old-timey mode, you
they
know?
were in super medieval at this point. For real.
Yeah.
That's what I keep thinking is like, this reminds me of like, bring out you dead. Just everybody's just killing each other. Like, it's all good. Give them death.
I mean, really, this seems so extreme on so many levels.
It's a little much.
It makes me think they probably executed a ton of people at this time.
Yeah.
The fact that Charles was executed and then every other accomplice.
Bald Jack.
How many people are they just executing for crazy, just random shit? Arbitrarily, I should say.
Random shit. I don't know about that. I don't know.
Anyway, sorry, that's my editorial stance. Just
No,
what the fuck is going on in New York at this time?
Same way.
Why are you killing everybody?
I felt the same way.
Oh,
this should be one and done. And it's lunchtime.
I just thought that was worth including because it was just such a crazy story. But the third one worked, like I said, and he was buried in Woodlawn Cemetery in the Bronx on August 2nd, 1915. After his death, Charles was the subject of several books that evaluated his possible innocence. I think at minimum, like you said, in a Charles Manson way where he just wasn't there.
Yeah.
And at maximum, possibly people think that he didn't even have anything to do with it at all. I kind of fall into the camp that he was behind it in some way or another, you know?
Yeah.
But there's really no doubt that just his execution was extreme, no matter which way you look at it, you know?
No, I agree with that.
In 1927, Henry Klein wrote a book that theorized Charles Becker had not orchestrated the hit, but merely stood back and kind of let the streets take care of it and get rid of Herman.
Sounds probably about right. I think that there was a little more puppeteering on Charles' end, but yeah, that'll work.
I think that you're the one that said that you're going to plant the seeds and then fuck them.
Yes, that's
I
me.
think he probably planted some seeds.
That was me.
And was just like, hey, someone ought to get rid of this guy.
There it is.
At the minimum, he was
agree.
involved in that much.
Yes.
And I think he kind of let this sort of seed fester where people were against Herman, enough people within the underworld and within the police, so that someone would take him out.
I agree.
Again, there's no denying that most of the people involved with his collections and his crew, his gang, were all the people that ended up doing the murder.
Yeah.
So there's just too much that implicates him to me. So, but it's disputed. It's worth pointing out.
Might be a waste of paper. Whatever.
So the author, Klein, also thinks that D.A. Whitman manipulated the evidence to implicate Charles because punishing Charles would help his own political aspirations, like I said before. I don't know. I think that's only part of it. That's just me.
Yeah, I think it's possible, but I don't think that's the full picture.
No. Again, his whole crew was the one that they were the gunmen.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't happen without his knowledge.
No.
That's all I'm saying. The murder is also depicted in Michael Bookman's book, God's Rat, Jewish Mafia on the Lower East Side. And a thinly fictionalized version of the murder is also described by mob boss Meyer Wolfsheim in F. Scott Fitzgerald's book, The Great Gatsby.
Interesting.
So this is our old-timey dirty cop story.
It's pretty dirty.
Yeah.
I think it's really a great example of like a dirty cop because we were even looking for dirty cops. And the thing you run into is it's all like, financial and extortion and just a lot of like racketeering, conspiracy. There's murder involved, but the murders are all byproducts of the bigger schemes and the bigger scams. And so there's a few, we were able to find a good few where there's just like cops out killing people and then getting away with it. And they're also cops. And it's like, wait a second. But this is a great example of everything. You got it all.
Yeah.
The racketeering, the charges, just the conspiracy, all of it. He's got a gang and he's anti-gang. It's just,
right.
It's great.
It's dirty on every level.
Yeah.
And especially, like I was saying earlier, just the ping-ponging back and forth of placing blame on other people in the NYPD. Like, oh, I'm not corrupt, but this person is.
Yes.
And that's just the ultimate corruption to me, is just like basically internal affairs is like, oh yeah, no, this person is corrupt over here, and internal affairs is the most corrupt.
That's like Charles Becker was the head of the anti-gang unit,
right?
Like, what in the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, to me this was
it's actually genius because he knows gangs so well, but that there is the definition of corruption. Like, okay.
It is a perfect example of dirty cop.
Yeah.
And again, I love historical cases and old-timey cases, and to me this did have everything. And especially I like the kind of cases where you can look at it and be like, what the fuck? Like, how did this person get executed for basically being Charles Manson?
Yeah, also just the physicality of his execution.
Yes.
Whoa.
Reading about the actual death in the electric chair was a visceral experience for me. Just awful, heartbreaking.
I forget about those things, like the actual manner of death, that kind of, how it works.
The barbaric way that people come to an end.
And all the different ways, gas chambers, the ways that we don't do anymore,
That we know now are just completely unreal, just heartbreakingly bad.
Yeah.
So that was our first old-timey dirty cop story.
Old-timey.
For me, it was just like, when I read this story, I was like, we got to start with this one. Because it
Yes.
is, when I think of dirty cops, I think of bowler hat, gangs of
Yeah.
New York, H.H. Holmes looking motherfuckers.
Totally. And the mob.
And
It's
casinos.
Like, it goes so hand in hand because they each got their shtick from the other, like La Casa Nostra and the NYPD and just the mob in general. All of it, it's all just hand in hand. So yeah, of course, dirty cop in New York 1912 is going to be a great time period for that.
Yeah.
They're wearing bowler hats.
This is one facet of the dirty cop genre, and we're going to explore some more in the coming weeks.
I'm excited.
We've got some great stories coming up.
Some fucked up stuff.
Yeah.
Cops get away with a lot.
Oh, yeah.
For long periods of time.
Which is exactly why when the letter D came up, there was other things like I'd love to do more Australia Down Under stories, but dirty cops have to be covered. We got to talk about it.
It was funny because I immediately went to dentists.
I know. You were like dentist, and I'm like, of all the D
I know.
subjects,
what about dentists? Hey, Brandon, what do you think about dentists? You like it? You think it's a good idea? Dentists? I bet I can find a really good dentist story. No, we're not doing dentists.
When you come to me, I really don't want to shit on you and be like, Dennis, Courtney, like, are you fucking for real right now?
I'm so for real. I've never been more for real about anything in my life. Dentist?
Dentist.
I'm into it. I got a friend whose mom's a dentist. You know, we can ask her a bunch of questions about dentists.
Every time a new subject comes up, you're like, I've got a friend. I know someone.
Someone's mom.
That once had a tooth that was fucked up. We should do dentist.
We can call that dentist.
Every single subject.
Yeah.
But I think dirty cops, dentists, great idea, Court, but dirty cops, you got to be dirty cops.
We'll save it for Patreon. I mean, I would love... Now I got to look tonight. I'm going to look up a great killer dentist just to show y'all.
Right. Just to prove
just for
I
Patreon.
was right.
Just for Patreon. Patreon only. Dentists.
We should. You should find that story. We'll do it for Patreon.
I will. Just for them. I will.
So that's going to be it for this week. We're going to be back with another dirty cop story next week. And before we get out of here, we just want to remind you, if you want to read more on the case, we've got those links in the show notes. If you want to join our Patreon, definitely check out the link in the show notes. If you want to get some merch, we've got a Threadless, and the link is in the show notes. And like we said, look out for that dentist story on our Patreon. And if you want to join, check it out in the description. Yeah?
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to get going, and we'll see you next
week. Be safe.
Week.
Everyone be really safe. I know we'll see you later.
You guys, Uber, Lyft.
All of it. I'm just putting it out there. All right. I love you all.
All right. We'll see you next week.
See ya.
Bye. Hi, I'm Brianna.
And I'm Courtney.
From Crime Screen Podcast.
Where every week we talk about movies, TV shows, and docuseries based on true crimes.
We discuss all the bingeable and unforgettable true crime that we're all watching on our screens at home.
Like Making a Murderer, Mommy Dead and Dearest, or Dear Zachary.
So if you're like us and have the problem of scaring off people at parties with serial killer facts and true crime stories,
or you just try to talk about whatever you watched and get horrified looks from coworkers and even your exasperated significant other,
then we are your new friends to discuss all the true crime with.
Follow Crime Screen Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to stay updated.
And subscribe to Crime Screen on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever else you listen to podcasts.
Finding the right pros for home projects can be tough and spark a lot of questions like, how do I find a pro who can help? Will they do a good job? Will I get a fair price? That's where HomeAdvisor can help. From leaky faucets to major remodels, HomeAdvisor connects you to the right pro for the job in seconds and even helps you get a fair price. Read reviews, check project cost guides, and book appointments. Go to HomeAdvisor.com or download the free HomeAdvisor app to start your next project.
The Starlight Lounge presents An Evening with the Progressive Box.
Old moon, yeah. That's Hugo, tickling the ivories. He just saved by bundling home and auto with Progressive. Gonna finally buy a ring for that gal of yours, Hugo? Send her my condolences. Hi-oh! This next one's for you two. There's a burglar in my heart. Thank you.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Discounts not available in all states or situations.